Thank you very much, Mr. President. I have one question about North Korea and one question about Israel.
We've changed this one question thing, haven't we?
Two foreign policy questions. You have said in the past that you would not meet with Kim Jong Un, the leader of North Korea, without certain preconditions.
Yes.
What are those preconditions, and do you believe he would ever be able to meet them?
Well, what I never do is I never make a judgment what a man or woman is going to do or not do based on what they said. We'll see. If he made any commitment, then I would meet with him, and if there was a commitment on which we met. And the commitment has to be that there's discussion about his nuclear arsenal. And if it's merely a means by which, how do we de-escalate what they're doing? And so if that was the case, I would not meet unless there was some outline made that my Secretary of State and others would have negotiated as to how we would proceed. But what I would not do is I would not do what had been done in the recent past. I would not give him all that he's looking for as international recognition as legitimate and give them what allowed him to move in the direction of appearing to be more, how can I say it, more serious about what he wasn't at all serious about. I'd have to know specifics, but the idea of never meeting with North Korea, I would make sure that my team had met with their counterparts, and I knew exactly what we were meeting on.
And then in the wake of all of your conversations this week, what is your relationship like now with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu? Do you have certain expectations that he will bolster the rights of the Palestinian people in some way? And if so, did you convey that to him in your conversations?
One of the reasons why we're able to get the ceasefire in 11 days, they didn't do what other people have done. I don't talk about what I tell people in private. I don't talk about what we negotiate in private. What I can assure you, though, is that the last time it took 56 days and then 6 months to get a ceasefire. I'm praying this ceasefire will hold. I take Bibi Netanyahu when he gives me his word. I take him at his word. He's never broken his word to me. And but what I've made clear is that it's essential. It's essential that the Palestinians on the West Bank be secured, that Abbas be recognized as the leader of the Palestinian people, which he is. Hamas is a terrorist organization. We recognize that. But that doesn't mean we should not be in Gaza, rebuilding Gaza for all those innocent people who, in fact, have been hurt and have been collateral damage, including loss of homes and a whole range of other things, as well as insisting that Israeli citizens, whether it be Arab or Jew, are treated equally as Israeli citizens, and that's what was going on in Jerusalem. And so that has to come to an end. And Bibi, the Prime Minister, knows my views, and but the commitment that was given was immediately kept. From the very beginning, I told him what our objective was, that there needed to be a ceasefire, and he, in fact, kept his commitment in the time frame in which he said he would do it. Thank you. And by the way, I wasn't the only one that spoke to him. I looked down here, every major player on my team, from Secretary of Defense to Secretary of State, all the way down the line, and our National Security Advisor were in constant contact with their counterparts in Israel, in Egypt, and throughout the Middle East. This was not something that was just done with a casual conversation between myself and Bibi. I have presumptuous of me to say this, Mr. President, but I think I've got a great team. And I spent a lot of time with El-Sisi on the phone in Egypt, and they've done a commendable job of bringing Hamas to the table and getting them to agree to a ceasefire as well. Thank you.